Angela Parker had always been the kind of woman people noticed without her even trying. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't loud. She carried herself with a quiet grace, the sort of presence that made neighbors wave from their porches and church ladies nod with a smile when she passed by. At 32, Angela seemed to be standing in the brightest season of her life. She and her husband Marcus had been married for 6 years, living in a modest 2-bedroom house on a quiet street in Atlanta. Marcus, a factory worker with strong shoulders and rough hands, was proud to provide for his wife. Their lives were simple. Church on Sundays, cookouts on weekends, evenings spent sitting on the porch swing, talking about their dreams. And now, after years of trying, the dream had finally come true. Angela was 8 months pregnant. Inside the little nursery they'd painted a soft pastel blue. A white crib sat in the corner with folded blankets stacked neatly. A rocking chair by the window waited for sleepless nights and lullabies. Angela had already hung tiny onesies on the closet door and lined up teddy bears like sentinels. Every piece of that room told a story of expectation, of hope. Neighbors often stopped by, bringing casseroles and hand-knitted baby booties. Everyone seemed to share in the joy. Angela's glowing with motherhood. One of the women from church whispered during Bible study. Another neighbor would lean over the picket fence and ask, "Any day now, huh?" Angela would smile, place her hands over her rounded belly, and nod with shy pride. To Marcus, it felt like life had finally settled into place. He worked long hours at the plant, grease often staining his shirt, but he didn't mind. Every paycheck went toward baby supplies, hospital bills, or the small savings account he'd set aside for college someday. "I'll finally be a dad," he told anyone who'd listen. Nothing in this world matters more. One warm June evening, as fireflies blinked in the yard, Angela sat on the porch swing while Marcus painted the last touches of trim around the nursery window. She leaned back, the golden light of dusk softening her features, and rested her hand against her belly. 8 months already, Marcus," she said with a gentle laugh. "Can you believe it? We're almost there." Marcus set his paintbrush down, wiped his hands on a rag, and joined her on the swing. He slipped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I can see it," he said softly. "I can already picture him, little baseball glove in his hand, chasing me in the yard." Or her, Angela teased, her eyes sparkling. "Could be a little girl with pigtails, following me around the kitchen, demanding cookies." Marcus chuckled, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Boy or girl, doesn't matter. As long as I get to hold that baby in my arms, we'll be the luckiest parents alive." The world around them seemed steady, peaceful. The creak of the porch swing, the hum of crickets, the low buzz of a neighbor's lawn mower fading into the evening. It was the rhythm of small-town life, unhurried and safe. And for Angela, every flutter inside her belly felt like a promise, like life itself was dancing under her skin. But beneath her smile, there was a whisper of unease she couldn't quite name. Sometimes, late at night, Angela would wake and press her hands against her stomach, wondering if she truly felt movement or only imagined it. The books she read assured her it was normal. Babies quiet down as they grow, space shrinking in the womb. Still, doubt crept in. She brushed it aside, convincing herself that every mother had moments of fear. Marcus never saw the worry in her eyes. To him, Angela was glowing, radiant, the very image of motherhood. He would lay his head against her belly and talk to the baby, his deep voice rumbling like a lullaby. "Daddy's here," he'd whisper. "Can't wait to meet you." And Angela, hearing him, would force herself to smile, telling herself everything was fine. That evening, as twilight settled, Angela leaned into her husband's chest, closing her eyes. For a moment, she let herself believe in the picture of happiness they had built. The nursery ready, the baby shower planned, the world waiting with open arms. She didn't know, couldn't know, that everything she clung to was about to collapse. That behind the glow of expectation lay a secret so devastating it would tear through their lives like a storm. For now, Angela Parker was simply a woman 8 months pregnant, sitting on her porch with her husband, dreaming about the child she believed was about to be born. The summer heat pressed heavy on Atlanta, thick and stifling, the kind of weather that left even the strongest man weary by mid-afternoon. For Angela Parker, 8 months pregnant, the heat was more than uncomfortable. It was suffocating. She tried to keep moving, keep smiling, But in the back of her mind, something didn't feel right. It started with restless nights. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, her hand pressed against her belly. Sometimes she swore she felt nothing. No kicks, no turns, no rolls. Then, just when panic crept in, there would be a faint flutter, almost too soft to notice. Relief would wash over her, but the worry never truly left. By day, she carried herself as if everything were normal. At the grocery store, neighbors would ask about her due date, and Angela would answer politely. "Just 4 more weeks," she'd say with a small smile. But when she walked back to her car, she would pause, gripping the steering wheel, whispering to herself, "Please, God, please let this child be all right." Marcus didn't see the full weight of her unease. He noticed her exhaustion, of course, and he begged her to rest more. "You're working too hard," he told her one Saturday afternoon as she folded tiny baby clothes at the kitchen table. "Sit down. Let me handle this." Angela gave him a tired smile. "I can't just sit and wait, Marcus. This baby's coming. Everything has to be ready." But that night, the pain struck, sharp and sudden, unlike anything she had felt before. It started low in her back, wrapping around her belly like a vice. Angela doubled over, gasping. Marcus rushed to her side, fear flashing across his face. "Angela, what is it?" he demanded, holding her as she tried to steady herself. "I don't know," she panted. "It's different this time. It's not like the little cramps I've had before." For a moment, Marcus froze, his rough hands trembling. Then instinct kicked in. He grabbed the car keys from the counter, guided her out the door, and practically carried her into the passenger seat of their aging Chevy. The night sky had turned dark and heavy with clouds, thunder rumbling in the distance as they sped toward Grady Memorial Hospital. Rain splattered the windshield, the wipers barely keeping up. Angela gritted her teeth against the pain, clutching her belly. She tried to breathe, evenly the way she'd practiced in birthing classes, but terror was stealing her rhythm. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Something's wrong. I can feel it." He tightened his grip on the wheel. "Don't say that. Don't even think it. We're going to get to the hospital, and the doctors will tell us everything's fine." Angela turned her face toward the window, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to hope. But deep inside, she knew this pain wasn't ordinary. This was something else. When they pulled into the emergency entrance, Marcus leapt from the car, shouting for help. Nurses rushed out with a wheelchair, lifting Angela gently but firmly. The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridors felt harsh, almost blinding after the dark storm outside. Dr. Carter, the senior obstetrician on call that night, entered the exam room moments later. He was a man in his late 50s, steady and composed, the kind of doctor who had delivered thousands of babies and thought he had seen it all. But as he looked at Angela, sweating and trembling on the bed, a flicker of concern crossed his usually calm face. "Mrs. Parker," he said softly, adjusting his glasses. "We're going to run some tests. I need you to stay as calm as possible." Angela nodded weakly, squeezing Marcus's hand. Marcus, pale and wide-eyed, couldn't stop himself from speaking. "Doctor, please, she's in so much pain. Just tell me my baby's okay." Dr. Carter hesitated only a moment before answering. "That's exactly what we're here to find out." The next hour crawled by in slow motion. Nurses prepped Angela for an ultrasound, the gel cold against her skin. The hum of machines filled the room, and the storm outside raged on, lightning flashing through the narrow hospital window. Marcus stood at Angela's side, his calloused hand trembling in hers. Angela stared at the ceiling, whispering prayers under her breath. "Please, Lord, please let me hear my baby's heartbeat." The room was tense, silent except for the steady whir of the machine. Dr. Carter's eyes narrowed as he moved the probe across her abdomen, scanning the screen. He pressed a little harder, adjusted the angle, moved again. His face remained unreadable, but his silence was deafening. Angela turned her head toward him, desperate. "Doctor, what do you see? Why aren't you saying anything?" Marcus's voice cracked with fear. "Is our baby all right?" Dr. Carter didn't answer immediately. He adjusted the machine again, his jaw tightening. Finally, he lowered the probe and glanced at the screen once more. The look in his eyes made Angela's stomach drop. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. And in that instant, the picture of happiness the Parkers had built, nursery, crib, lullabies waiting, began to tremble on the edge of collapse. The hum of the ultrasound machine filled the room like an ominous drone, steady and cold. Angela lay back on the exam table, her skin slick with sweat, her heart pounding faster than the storm outside. The probe glided over her swollen belly, and every second of silence from Dr. Carter was another weight crushing down on her chest. Marcus stood at her side, his hand clasping hers so tightly it hurt. He leaned forward, his voice rough and trembling. "Doctor, why won't you just tell us what's happening? We can take it. Just say it." Dr. Carter's eyes stayed fixed on the flickering screen, a blur of black and gray shapes. Normally, the rhythmic sound of a heartbeat would be echoing through the room by now, steady and reassuring. But there was nothing. No thump, no pulse, just a hollow silence. Finally, he lowered the probe, pressing his lips into a thin line. He turned slowly, as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," he began, voice quiet, deliberate. "I'm afraid there's no heartbeat." The words hung in the air like a guillotine. Angela blinked rapidly, as if she hadn't heard him right. "What? No, that can't be true. I felt him kick just last week. I swear I did." Her voice cracked, desperate. Marcus shook his head violently. "No. Run it again. Do another test. There has to be a mistake." Dr. Carter's expression softened, but his tone remained steady, clinical. "I did. More than once. I'm sorry. There is no sign of life." Angela let out a cry that seemed to tear from the deepest part of her soul. She grabbed Marcus's arm, clinging to him as sobs racked her body. He bent down, pressing his forehead against hers, his own tears blurring his vision. "It can't be," he whispered. "It just can't be." But then, Dr. Carter hesitated. His brows furrowed, his eyes narrowing at the images on the monitor. He picked up the probe again, almost reluctantly, and swept it slowly across Angela's stomach once more. This time, his silence lasted even longer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, almost heavy with disbelief. This isn't a typical stillbirth." Angela froze, her sobs caught in her throat. She looked up at him, eyes wide and red. "What do you mean?" The doctor swallowed hard, his gaze shifting between them. "What I'm seeing on this screen, the tissue, the condition of the fetus, it suggests the child has been deceased for some time. Not days, not weeks, months." Marcus's mouth fell open. His grip on Angela loosened as though the air had been knocked out of him. "What the hell are you saying?" "I'm saying," Dr. Carter continued carefully, "that based on these findings, this child may have died very early in the pregnancy. Possibly before you even knew you were carrying." The room spun around Angela. She tried to push herself up on her elbows, shaking her head violently. No, you're wrong. I felt him. I felt him move. Every kick, every turn. Don't tell me that wasn't real." Dr. Carter sighed, removing his gloves. "Sometimes the body plays cruel tricks. The uterus can contract, muscles can shift, fluids can move. It can mimic the sensation of life, even when," his voice faltered, "even when there is none." Angela screamed, the sound piercing and raw. She collapsed back onto the bed, clutching her belly as if she could will the baby back into existence. Marcus stood motionless, staring at the doctor like he was some executioner delivering a sentence. "This doesn't make sense," Marcus growled, his voice rising. "You're telling me my wife carried a corpse inside her for 8 months? That she's been walking around glowing, smiling, planning a nursery, when all along there was nothing but death?" The doctor didn't flinch. He'd seen fathers lash out before, but never with this kind of fury. "I know it's almost impossible to believe, but I assure you, the images don't lie. I will order further tests, but the signs are clear." Angela turned her face to Marcus, her tears streaming. "Why, Marcus? Why would God do this to me? Why let me believe?" Marcus knelt by her side, choking back his own sobs. "Don't you blame yourself, Angela. Don't you dare. This isn't on you." His voice broke into a whisper. We just didn't know." The storm outside crashed against the hospital windows, lightning illuminating the room for a brief second. It felt like the world itself was grieving with them. Nurses entered quietly, adjusting monitors and preparing Angela for observation, but the couple hardly noticed. Their lives had been upended in one cruel revelation. And yet, beneath the grief, suspicion began to coil. Marcus's jaw tightened, his thoughts racing. How could no one have caught this before? How could a woman carry death for so long without knowing? Dr. Carter placed a hand on Angela's arm, his voice steady. We'll need to perform a procedure to remove the remains safely. It won't be easy, but it's necessary for your health. I'll be with you every step of the way. Angela closed her eyes, her body trembling. She couldn't process it, couldn't accept it. The child she had spoken to, dreamed of, prayed over, was gone. Worse than gone. He had never been alive the way she believed. Marcus kissed her damp forehead, his tears falling onto her skin. I love you, Angela. We'll get through this. Somehow. But deep down, neither of them knew how. As the doctor left the room, Marcus remained by his wife's side, staring at the blank screen where life should have been. His heart pounded with rage and disbelief, and a question he could not silence. What else don't we know? In that moment, grief gave way to something darker, a gnawing suspicion that this tragedy was more than just fate. The silence after Dr. Carter left was unbearable. The monitor screen still glowed dimly, mocking them with its emptiness. Angela lay curled on her side, hands clutched around her belly as though holding on to what she could not let go. Marcus sat in the chair beside her, shoulders hunched, staring at the floor tiles as if they might give him answers. For hours, neither spoke. Nurses drifted in and out, checking vitals, murmuring words of sympathy, but their comfort was useless. Grief had settled over the room like a heavy fog, thick and suffocating. By dawn, Angela's sobs had faded into a hollow stillness. She stared at the ceiling, her face pale, eyes rimmed red. I carried death, Marcus, she whispered. I smiled. I prayed. I sang lullabies to something that was already gone. Marcus reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Don't touch me, she said, her voice sharp but weak. I can't, not right now. He recoiled, hurt flashing across his face, but he didn't argue. He knew her words weren't born from hatred, but from despair. Still, the distance between them grew with every passing minute. Outside the hospital, the news had already begun to spread. A nurse, unable to contain the shock of what she had seen, whispered it to a colleague. By the time morning shift began, the story was trickling into the neighborhood. Angela Parker carried a dead baby for months. Neighbors who once celebrated her pregnancy now whispered behind curtains. At the corner store, two women leaned in close. I heard the baby was gone the whole time. Can you imagine? 8 months. Another shook her head. It's unnatural. Something's not right about it. By evening, the whispers turned into rumors. Some said it was the hospital's fault, that doctors ignored warning signs. Others muttered about curses, old family sins resurfacing. And a few, always the cruel few, wondered aloud if Angela herself had done something wrong. Back in the hospital, Angela felt the weight of those unseen voices pressing against her. She could almost hear them in the silence of the ward. Failure. Shame. A mother who wasn't a mother at all. Her mother, Evelyn, visited that evening, clutching a Bible to her chest. She took one look at Angela and burst into tears. Baby girl, I don't know why God allowed this, she said, rocking back and forth on the edge of the bed. But you can't let the devil steal your faith. You hear me? Angela turned her face toward the wall. Mama, don't preach to me. Not now. I don't have the strength. Evelyn's lips quivered, but she obeyed, bowing her head in silent prayer. Marcus paced the hallway outside, fists clenched. Every nurse he passed seemed to avoid his gaze, as if they carried secrets they weren't ready to share. The thought gnawed at him. How could no one have noticed? How could this go on for so long without a single doctor raising alarm? When he returned to Angela's room, she was awake, eyes blazing with a strange mix of grief and fury. Why didn't anyone tell us? She demanded. All those appointments, all those ultrasounds, how could they not see the truth? Marcus sat heavily in the chair. I don't know, Angela, but I promise you this, I'm going to find out. Someone's lying, or someone's hiding something. She closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. And what if it's not them, Marcus? What if it's me? What if my body betrayed me? He leaned forward, gripping her hand despite her earlier rejection. Don't you dare blame yourself. This isn't your fault. We'll get answers. I swear it. But beneath his determination, doubt still whispered. Doubt about the doctors. Doubt about fate. And, though he tried to bury it, doubt about his own wife. As night fell once more, Angela drifted into a restless sleep, her body trembling even in dreams. Marcus sat in the dark, staring at the shadow of the nursery mobile they had brought to the hospital. A small gesture of hope, now twisted into cruel irony. The nursery back home waited, filled with clothes, toys, and dreams that would never come true. And outside those hospital walls, the world was already watching, already speculating, turning their private tragedy into a story for gossip. The Parkers had entered the hospital as expectant parents, ready to welcome life. Now they were prisoners of grief, trapped between whispered doubts and a truth that felt unbearable. And neither of them knew. The storm was only just beginning. The next morning, the hospital corridors bustled with routine activity, but in Angela Parker's room, nothing felt ordinary. A hollow silence clung to the walls, broken only by the occasional beep of a monitor. Angela sat propped against her pillows, her face pale, her body still aching. Marcus hovered by the window, staring at the rain-slicked streets below, jaw clenched tight. Neither of them expected the knock at the door. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker?" a calm voice called. A tall woman in a tailored gray suit stepped inside, flashing her badge. "Detective Lucia Parker. Homicide Division." Angela blinked, startled. Marcus frowned. "Homicide? What are you doing here?" "Our baby's gone, but there's no crime." Detective Parker stepped closer, her expression steady but cautious. "I understand this is a painful time, but your doctor raised some concerns. He reported irregularities in the ultrasound findings, evidence suggesting the fetus may have died months ago, earlier than you were ever told you were pregnant." Angela's mouth fell open. "Why would that bring the police?" "Because," Lucia said evenly, "if a death occurred under suspicious circumstances, or if there was any negligence, we have a responsibility to investigate." Marcus stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "So you're saying my wife, my grieving wife, needs to be questioned like a suspect?" Lucia shook her head. "No, I'm saying the truth matters. To both of you. And right now, there are too many unanswered questions." Angela's voice cracked. "Unanswered questions? I've lived with this child inside me for 8 months. I planned his nursery. I prayed over his life. And now you're telling me he was never alive." Her words dissolved into sobs. Lucia softened. She pulled a chair close to Angela's bedside. "Mrs. Parker, I'm sorry, but we need to know, when did you first realize you were pregnant?" Angela swallowed hard. 2 months in. I took a test at home, then went to the clinic. They confirmed it. They told me I was carrying a healthy baby. "And did you have regular checkups after that?" Lucia asked gently. Angela nodded. "Every month. They measured me. They listened for a heartbeat. I thought I heard it." Lucia scribbled in her notebook. But according to Dr. Carter, what they were picking up might not have been fetal heart activity at all. It could have been background sounds. He thinks no one looked close enough. Marcus slammed his fist against the windowsill. "So what? You're saying they let my wife believe a lie? For 8 damn months." Lucia met his gaze, unflinching. "That's one possibility. But we also need to rule out others. Medical tampering, record falsification, even deliberate deception." Angela's head shot up. "Deliberate? Who would do that to me?" Lucia hesitated. "That's what we're here to find out." The words struck like a stone in still water, rippling outward. Suddenly, this wasn't just a tragedy, it was a mystery. Later that afternoon, hospital administrators were called in for questioning. Files were pulled. Angela's medical charts were laid out under harsh fluorescent lights. Dr. Carter explained his findings, his voice grim. "From everything I've seen, this fetus was non-viable from the very beginning. Someone should have known. Someone should have told her." Lucia studied the charts, her sharp eyes scanning each page. If that's true, then the Parkers were deceived. And deception always leaves fingerprints. Meanwhile, Angela lay in her hospital bed, her thoughts spiraling. Could it really be possible that every appointment, every test, had been nothing more than a cruel charade? That she had been carrying not life, but death, while others looked away? Marcus sat at her side, gripping her hand, his anger boiling hotter with each passing hour. "Angela, I promise you, if someone did this to us, they're going to pay. I'll make sure of it." She turned her eyes to him, her voice trembling. "And if no one's to blame? If it's just fate?" Marcus shook his head fiercely. "No, I don't buy that. Somebody knew, and we're going to find out who." That night, the Parkers weren't alone in their grief anymore. They were part of something larger, a case, an investigation, a story that stretched beyond their family into questions of trust, betrayal, and hidden truths. And as Detective Lucia Parker closed her notebook and walked out into the rain, she knew this was only the beginning. 2 days later, the Parkers sat in a small consultation room, the kind with beige walls and plastic chairs that squeaked whenever you shifted. Angela sat rigid, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Marcus paced the floor, restless, like a man preparing for a fight. Detective Lucia Parker entered with Dr. Carter at her side, a sealed envelope in her hand. Angela's chest tightened at the sight of it. She didn't know what was inside, but instinct told her it was bad, very bad. Lucia pulled out a chair and sat across from them, her tone measured. We've received the results from the DNA analysis. It's standard procedure in cases like this, given the irregularities. Marcus stopped pacing. His voice was sharp. DNA analysis? For what? The baby is ours. Lucia held his gaze. That's what we needed to confirm. Angela's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She turned to Marcus, searching his face. He looked indignant, offended even, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a flicker she couldn't read. Dr. Carter cleared his throat, his voice heavy. The results show that the fetus was not genetically related to you, Mr. Parker. The words detonated in the room. Angela gasped as though struck. What are you saying? Lucia's voice was calm but firm. The child was not Marcus's. Angela whipped her head toward her husband, disbelief painted across her tear-streaked face. Marcus, tell me that's not true. Tell me this is some kind of mistake. Marcus's lips parted, but no words came out. His jaw clenched, his fists tightened at his sides. Marcus, Angela's voice rose, raw with desperation. Say something. He finally spoke, his voice low, guttural. It was before Angela. Before you even knew. Before we. He trailed off, unable to finish. Her world collapsed in that instant. She stumbled back in her chair, clutching her chest, as if her heart itself had been ripped out. You cheated? You gave yourself to another woman, and I carried the consequence. Marcus reached out, but she shoved his hand away. It was a mistake, he pleaded. A one-time mistake. I never thought it would come back. I never thought. Angela's scream cut through his words, piercing and furious. A mistake? You call this a mistake? I have lived with death inside me for 8 months, Marcus. I sang to a corpse. I dreamed of a child that was never yours, and you knew there was a chance. He shook his head violently. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. She never told me she was pregnant. Who? Angela demanded, her voice shaking with rage. Who was she? Marcus's silence was answer enough. Angela slammed her fist against the table. Tell me her name. He finally whispered. Her name was Denise. It was years ago, before you and I. Years ago? Angela's laugh was hollow, bitter. Don't lie to me. If it was years ago, then how could her child be in my womb? Tell me that. Lucia broke the silence, her tone cutting through the storm. Mrs. Parker, it's possible the affair happened more recently than your husband admits. The timeline suggests the conception was not long before you believed you were pregnant. Angela's face twisted in horror. She turned to Marcus again, her voice trembling. So while I thought you were celebrating our family, you were betraying me? Sleeping with another woman, while I prayed for a child? Marcus's eyes filled with tears. I wanted you, Angela. I wanted us. Denise was a mistake I regret every single day. Please, don't let this destroy us. Angela stared at him, her entire body trembling. Destroy us? Marcus, it already has. You destroyed me. She pushed back from the table, nearly toppling the chair, and stumbled toward the door. Marcus followed, calling her name, but she spun on him, her voice like a blade. Don't you dare follow me. Don't you dare. She stormed down the corridor, her sobs echoing off the sterile walls. Marcus stood frozen, his face etched with anguish, his hands gripping his hair as though he could tear out the guilt. Lucia watched them, her notebook closed on the table. She had seen families torn apart before, but rarely with a revelation this cruel. To carry a dead child was horror enough. To learn it wasn't her husband's child, it was devastation beyond words. Later that night, Angela sat alone in her hospital room, staring at the bassinet brochure a nurse had left behind weeks earlier. She shredded it into pieces, her tears soaking the paper. All lies, she whispered. Every bit of it lies. Marcus stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, listening to the sound of his wife breaking. He wanted to go in, to beg again, but he knew his presence would only wound her deeper. The baby they had dreamed of was gone. The marriage they had built for 6 years now hung by a thread. And in the shadows of their grief, the cruelest truth had surfaced. Sometimes the deadliest betrayal is not in what you lose, but in what you discover too late. As dawn broke, Angela made a vow to herself. She would not be defined by Marcus's lies, nor by the corpse she had unknowingly carried. She would find a way to stand again, even if it meant standing alone. The night before Angela's surgery was suffocating. Rain tapped against the hospital window like impatient fingers, and the fluorescent lights in her room hummed faintly, a cruel reminder that sleep would not come easily. Angela lay on her side, staring at the shadows on the wall, her hands pressed against the belly that had become both her pride and her curse. Marcus sat in the chair beside her bed, his head bowed, elbows on his knees. For hours he had stayed silent, hoping she might let him close again, but the distance between them was wider than ever. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse but sharp. "Don't pretend you're here for me, Marcus. You're here because you're guilty." He lifted his head, eyes red-rimmed. "I'm here because I love you, Angela. Because I can't stand the thought of losing you too." Her laugh was bitter, hollow. "You already lost me. You lost me the moment you brought another woman's ghost into my body." He flinched, pressing a hand against his face. "I didn't know, Angela. I swear to God, I didn't know she was pregnant. If I had—" "Don't," she snapped. "Don't you dare say if you had. You betrayed me, and that betrayal grew inside me like a poison. And now tomorrow, they're going to cut it out of me." Her eyes burned with tears. "Do you have any idea what that feels like?" Marcus stood, desperate, reaching for her hand. "Please, Angela. We can get through this. People survive worse. Don't let this tear us apart." She yanked her hand away, her voice trembling with fury. "You don't get to talk about survival. You lied, you cheated, and you left me to carry the weight of your sin. Tomorrow, when they wheel me into that operating room, I'll go in alone. Do you understand? Alone." The words hit him harder than any blow. He staggered back, his broad frame suddenly small, defeated. For the first time, Marcus didn't argue. He sat down again, silent, tears streaming down his face. Hours later, when the nurses came to prepare her, Angela barely looked at him. She signed the forms, listened to the instructions, and clutched her mother's hand instead. Evelyn prayed softly at her side, whispering, "Lord, give my daughter strength. Carry her through the valley." Marcus stood at the doorway, watching, excluded from the sacred circle of mother and daughter. His heart ached, but he knew he had done this to himself. The next morning, just before dawn, they wheeled Angela into surgery. The hallway lights flickered overhead as she passed, her face pale but resolute. She didn't glance back at Marcus, though she felt his eyes on her the entire way. In the operating room, the sterile air stung her nose. She closed her eyes as the anesthesiologist spoke, her mind racing with images. The nursery painted blue, the rocking chair by the window, Marcus's hand pressed against her belly whispering promises. All of it had been built on a lie. When she woke, hours later, it was over. Her body was lighter, but her soul felt hollow. The life, or the death, she had carried was gone. A nurse told her gently, "The procedure was successful. You'll recover physically." But no words could address the cavern left in her spirit. That evening, Angela asked for her clothes. She didn't want the hospital gown anymore. She dressed slowly, every movement deliberate, as though shedding not just the garment, but the last remnants of illusion. Marcus entered quietly, holding a small paper bag of food he had brought from her favorite diner. He set it on the counter, unsure of what to say. Finally, he whispered, "Angela, please. I can't lose you." She looked at him, her eyes hollow but steady. "You already have." Then she reached into the drawer and pulled out a bundle of tiny clothes, the onesies, the socks, the baby blanket she had insisted on keeping nearby. She folded them neatly, placed them in a box, and handed it to him. "Take these home. Put them in the nursery you were so proud of. Let them remind you of what you took from me." Marcus's hands shook as he accepted the box. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Angela walked to the window, staring at the storm clouds breaking into thin ribbons of light. "Tomorrow, I leave this place. And when I do, I leave you too." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Marcus bowed his head, clutching the box to his chest, while Angela stood tall, her tears finally dry. The surgery had removed more than just what lay inside her. It had cut away the last thread tethering her to a life built on lies. And as the sun broke through the clouds, Angela Parker knew she was no longer the woman who had entered that hospital. She was someone new, wounded, but unbroken, ready to step into a future without him. Angela Parker left the hospital on a cool morning. The storm clouds finally cleared, leaving the streets damp and glistening. The air smelled of wet asphalt and blooming magnolia, a strange blend of endings and beginnings. She wore a simple dress, her frame smaller now, her steps slower, but her chin lifted high. Every movement carried the weight of loss, yet also the spark of survival. Marcus trailed behind her at first, carrying the box of baby clothes she had handed him the night before. His shoulders sagged, his eyes hollow. He wanted to speak, to beg, but he could already feel her slipping beyond his reach. When they reached the curb, Angela turned, her gaze steady, her voice calm. "This is where you stop, Marcus." His throat tightened. "Angela, don't do this. Don't walk away. We can fix." "No." She cut him off gently, but firmly. "Some things can't be fixed. Some things aren't meant to be." She gestured toward the box in his arms. "That's all that's left of what we dreamed. Keep it if you want. Bury it if you must. But I won't carry it anymore." Marcus's lips trembled, but no words came. He clutched the box tighter, as if it were the last fragile link between them. Angela gave him one final look, not of hatred, but of sorrow, then turned and walked away. Her mother, Evelyn, stood by the car waiting. She opened the passenger door, steadying her daughter with a hand on her back. As Angela slid inside, she exhaled a long, weary breath. For the first time in months, her belly felt empty, but her spirit, though fractured, felt her own again. The drive home was quiet. Evelyn prayed softly under her breath, her fingers wrapped around a rosary, while Angela stared out the window at the passing neighborhoods. Each house they passed reminded her of the whispers, the pitying glances, the judgment that had already begun. But she no longer cared. The truth was hers to bear, and she would bear it on her own terms. When they pulled into her driveway, Angela looked at the small blue nursery window on the second floor. The sight of it tightened her chest, but she did not cry. Instead, she walked straight inside, her steps deliberate. Upstairs, she opened the door to the nursery. The crib stood ready, the rocking chair beside it, waiting for nights that would never come. Angela touched the edge of the crib, her hand lingering. Then, with a steady motion, she began to strip the room. The blankets came down. The stuffed animals were placed in bags. The tiny mobile over the crib was taken apart piece by piece. She worked in silence, her face calm, as though dismantling not just a room, but a dream. By the time she finished, the nursery was empty, bare walls staring back at her. Angela stood in the middle of the room, breathing deeply. "Goodbye," she whispered, not to Marcus, not even to the child that never was, but to the life she had imagined. Downstairs, Evelyn waited with open arms. Angela stepped into her mother's embrace, her body trembling only for a moment before she steadied herself. "It's over, Mama," she said softly. "No," Evelyn replied, cupping her daughter's face. "It's not over. It's a new beginning." Angela closed her eyes, letting those words sink in. For the first time, she believed them. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the Atlanta sky in streaks of orange and gold, Angela sat on the porch swing alone. She rocked gently, the air cool against her skin. She thought about Marcus, his lies, his tears, the way he had once held her with such certainty. But she did not long for him. The man she had loved no longer existed. She thought about the child she never had, the lullabies she would never sing. And though grief lingered like a shadow, it no longer consumed her. She had survived. Angela Parker had walked through death, betrayal, and heartbreak. And though the scars would remain, she had chosen life. She had chosen herself. As the first stars appeared overhead, she whispered into the night, "I'm still here." And for the first time in a long time, the words felt true.